So quickly talk about finishes. I'm getting ready to glue up the little bench. Some of these interiors are going to be a little difficult to do much with after I've already glued up. So I'm going to pre-finish these. Actually, I've already pre-finished these, but I'll talk quickly about what I've done. Pre-finishing is something I tend to do a fair amount. I'd say there's probably an equal amount of people that pre-finish versus people that just exclusively finish after the project's glued up. I tend to like pre-finishing, as again, sort of these tight areas that are hard to get to. Let me move the camera real quick and I'll show you another thing I'm talking about. So this is armoire that I'm working on. This is frame and panel joinery. So these panels are pretty much impossible to finish where it sits inside the frame. So I typically do these beforehand. Also tend to do a lot of the frame as well, particularly these inside edges. I could get to all this, the legs here pretty easy. Inside this area is going to be a little difficult to get to after it's glued up. So I tend to pre-finish those as well. But anyhow, so the benefits of pre-finishing obviously are, those areas that are difficult to get to. I've already got finished on those. A downside of pre-finishing is if I damage any of those areas during glue up or assembly, then I've got to go back and do some refinishing. Okay. So again, pre-finishing, I tend to like it. A lot of people aren't that fond of it, but there's like pros and cons to doing it either way. Anyhow, so I did pre-finish the inside of these surfaces, and I did this pretty much with a super blonde shellac. I really like the lighter colors of this hackberry, so I want to try to maintain those as much as possible. So I'm going to zoom up here. You can kind of hopefully see the difference here. Yeah, you can see it there. So this is unfinished. This is with the super blonde shellac. You can see there's a little bit of yellowing with the shellac. My other choice could have been to use a water-based polyurethane. That will tend to keep more of this white color. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the finishes here in just a moment. But some of the reasons we might want to finish is finishing helps protect the piece. We've got something on there maybe a little bit harder than the wood, so it tends to act as protecting it, sort of help eliminate a little bit of the damage, particularly from maybe somebody dragging something across the top of your table or something. The finish is going to be a little more durable. If somebody spills a drink or something on top of that piece, the finish helps protect that, depending on what the finish is. If we're using something like just a pure shellac, if they spill, particularly a grain alcohol, something like Everclear on top of it, that Everclear, that alcohol will act as a solvent for shellac. So, tabletop where somebody's going to be drinking, hard liquor on, shellac might not be the best choice. The other reason we might want to use a finish is, if we have a lot of extreme moisture or humidity content changes in our environment. For some, say for example, something like Houston, where it's pretty dry in the winter, very, very humid in the summer. Finish will help slow down that moisture transfer in that piece. So the equilibrium moisture content of the wood will lag a little bit behind changes in humidity. It doesn't stop it from happening. It's just going to slow things down a little bit. If we put finish on one side of a piece, we typically want to finish the other side of the piece. Again, you know, if we don't finish the back side, then we've got more moisture sort of introduced to that piece and escaping from that piece from one side than we do the other side. It's going to lead to some sort of uneven tensions in that wood due to moisture content. So typically we want to finish one side. If we finish, you know, we want to finish the other side of any sort of piece. So just kind of keep that moisture content sort of even as best as we can. There's nothing to say that you have to finish a piece. It's perfectly fine to leave a piece raw. You know, you can put just wax on a piece. So there's no real, you know, so there's no real thing to say that we absolutely have to finish a piece. Most of the finishes I'm going to talk about today are easily applied finishes. It's more of what I tend to use, only because you know, I can send, you know, a piece of, you know, a little container of that finish with the piece, so you know, a client can potentially refinish the piece. If it's a scratch on it or something, they can flow a little bit of oil varnish back into it, and you know, might be able to put a little more shellac to it. Or if they contact me, I can tell them how to repair the piece and then send them a little bit of finish. It also is something I tend to be just a little bit more comfortable with. In addition to, my insurance right now does not allow me to spray finishes in my shop here. You know, that they tend to be spray finishes, particularly if we're dealing with something like a lacquer. It's almost like an automotive type finish. They tend to be highly volatile. You know, particularly if you got a lot of aerosolized finish in the air and you have a spark or something, that can be pretty problematic. So wipe-on finishes, we don't have as much of an issue with that. So again, I didn't wind up getting an extra rider on my insurance to be able to allow me to spray finishes. That being said, if I wanted to spray something like a watered down polyurethane or something, I don't think that would be particularly hazardous, and I'd probably do that regardless of the you know, sort of the additional rider on my insurance. Wouldn't go as far as spraying sort of lacquers though. That just kind of is a little bit different animal. You know, lacquers tend to be one of the most durable finishes, particularly if we're talking about catalyzed lacquers. So your kitchen cabinets, that type of stuff, they're generally probably sprayed with catalyzed lacquer. They're one of the most durable finishes. On the other hand, if they're damaged, they also happen to be, you know, not repairable. So if you get you know, a catalyzed lacquer and you do get a deep scratch on it, you pretty much have to go back down to bare wood and refinish that piece. Not so much with the finishes that I'm using. So let me move the camera and let's talk a little bit about these finishes. Okay, so probably one of the easiest finishes to do is just a pure wax. This happens to be a general, just a wax you can find pretty much anywhere in any sort of big box store. Works relatively well. This is Goddard's. This is something I've had for quite a while, and I tend to use this on more nicer pieces, particularly small boxes. Actually, I'm not sure if they make the Goddard's cabinet wax any longer or not. So I'm going to have to look around. This is the last I've got. I may wind up just kind of saving this for special projects. A soft wax that you can get from this, so I don't know if those of you are familiar with Chris Schwartz. He written a series of books. One's called Anarchist's Tool Chest. The other one's The Anarchist's Guide to Woodworking. So he's kind of become sort of tongue-in-cheek known as the Anarchist's Woodworker. His daughter sells this soft wax on Etsy. I think her shop is that Anarchist's Daughter. So this is a real nice, easy, simple wax. I think it's mostly beeswax and real high quality turpentine. Might have something else on it, but it's easy to use, unlike a car wax, which is generally carnauba wax. It tends to be harder. this stuff goes on pretty easy. You let it sit for 15 minutes, wipe it off, and that's about it. The bad side about waxes are you don't want to build them up. One coat is generally all you want to use. If you build up other coats, all it does is really act as sort of an agent for adhering to dirt. Then you have to get some sort of mineral spirits, turpentine or something, and strip that wax off. So waxes, like a lot of small boxes, I may only use wax on them, just because I want somebody to feel that wood. It wants to have a nice slick surface, smooth surface, but I actually want somebody to feel the texture of the wood. So, next thing I will tend to use a lot of is shellacs. This is, most of the shellac I get is from shellac.net. This one happens to work real well for arts and crafts finishes, particularly darker ones. It's a black shellac. Old records, now we call them vinyl, but way back when they actually used to be made with black shellac. So if you find a real old one, you might be able to even add some solvent to it and melt down an old record. But yeah, the black shellac is pretty much the same as what those really, really old records are. So shellac is basically they're flakes. They're dried from the excretion of a lac bug, then harvested and then sort of cleaned up. Most of what I have is de-waxed shellac. De-wax is important if you want to put anything over the top of it. Generally, what we consider shellac is that it's a finish that sticks to anything, and anything sticks to shellac. So a lot of furniture restorers will wind up using shellac on a piece that they're restoring. They don't necessarily know what that sort of original finish is, and if they need to put something on top of it, they can put a coat of shellac over top of it, and then whatever top coat they want. That ensures that whatever finish they wind up putting on after the piece is restored will stick to whatever is originally there. But if you want to sort of have that ability, you need to have de-wax. Basically, we're pulling all of the wax out of those shellac flakes. One I tend to like a lot is garnet shellac. It tends to be a little darker. I use this on cherry, mahogany. Sometimes I use it on walnut. Depends on how light or dark that walnut is. I may use an amber shellac, which is a little bit lighter if that walnut's already real dark. If I have a lot of purples in it, from air-dried walnut, I may not want to sort of use a darker shellac because I want to sort of retain that purple color. But garnet shellac is what I tend to use a lot of. What is this? I think this one might be a ruby shellac. So again, a little bit different shade to it. More black. This is an orange, so if I'm using it more on sort of a medium toned sort of wood, an orange will bring out the nice color to the orange shellac and to that piece. I don't know where so this is the platinum bond, or what they call super blonde shellac. That's what I used on this. So when I use this shellac, these flakes can be a little bit big. They take a little long to dissolve. So I've got a little small food processor that I'll wind up grinding these flakes into almost a powder. And then I mix them with a denatured alcohol. The cleaner the denatured alcohol, the better. This one happens to be just one from Home Despot. A lot of people will use Everclear grain alcohol. They consider it one of the better solvents for shellac. So basically, you just take those ground up flakes, depending on what the ratio is, and there's ratios on calculators online where you can wind up sort of deciding what pound cut you want to use. 3 pound cut is basically 3 pounds of shellac to 1 gallon of alcohol. That's a huge amount. Even though we might use that ratio, we're probably not going to mix that much. I tend to use about a 1.5 pound cut, so about half of that 3 pound cut. It's just a little less thick. It tacks up a little bit less quickly. It's just easier to apply multiple coats. So I tend to use about a 1.5 pound cut. So I take the ground shellac flakes and mix those in alcohol. Let them dissolve, stir them up occasionally, and keep doing that until I get to where I want. So, is that it? Let me figure out where I put most of the blonde. There it is. Okay. So, I'm gonna move the camera again real quick. Okay. Just stir this up a little bit. So one of the other nice things about shellac is as you put subsequent coats on, it easily sticks to itself. If you have a spot that has blemishes, all you have to do is add a little bit of the shellac, or even just the solvent, and it will start to sort of dissolve that sort of drip, or sort of that blemish that you have on it, so you can soften up that previous coat and get it cleaned up and get more shellac to adhere to it. It tends to dry relatively fast, particularly at the 1.5 pound cut. And so that it would be the first coat. And I'll put anywhere between, I don't know, 3 to 5 coats on this. I don't generally tend to put a whole lot on it. But it's real easy to apply. We'll usually wear gloves. I didn't that time just because it was easier not to. It wears off fairly quickly, and it's just denatured alcohol, so it's not horribly bad for your flesh. Probably wouldn't make it a long-term habit. Another thing I might use is sort of beeswax, and you can melt that up and mix it with a little again, mineral spirits, turpentine, and that, just beeswax can make a good finish. These things are called polissoirs. It's something, again, Chris Schwartz and a couple other people brought back from more of a sort of more older tradition of woodworking that we don't typically use too much anymore, but that's sort of what Chris Schwartz is kind of into. But these are basically straw, and I have not soaked these yet. I had one before that the dogs got a hold of, and it wasn't usable anymore. But basically, I impregnate, sort of soak the fibers in beeswax, let it harden up, and then what I can do is basically introduce this to a workpiece, and it puts a real thin coat of beeswax on it and burnishes the surface. So it makes a nice little, medium sheen type finish to it without really putting a heavy duty finish on it. So polissoirs are kind of interesting. Let's see, polyurethanes, I generally don't use a whole lot of polyurethane, so sort of the medium film finishes, I tend to have either a urethane solid in it or an alkyd solid in it, depending on what you call it. Polyurethane, they'll have a urethane solid. This is spar varnish. Spar varnishes tend to have an alkyd solid in them. The difference is alkyd solids, they tend to move a little bit more. So if you have a piece like a canoe, obviously a sailboat spar, or the mast of a sailboat, this is typically what they would use it for. That mast is constantly being stretched and moved. So you want a finish that tends to move with it a little bit. That's the nice thing about spar varnishes. It's exactly what they were made for. So it doesn't really matter what kind of the solid is in there. You sort of pick, the one or the other. Since I tend to do a lot of boat building and that type of stuff, I've always sort of gravitated more towards spar varnishes. A lot of people, if you look on social media and sort of the magazines or that type of stuff, a lot of people will use polyurethanes. Polyurethanes is just never something I've quite gravitated towards. So I don't use them all that often. These, you can either use them as they are, or typically you want to thin them out. The Epiphonus is one of the more highly regarded spar varnishes. I think, if I recall right, it's 60 or 70% solids. It is thick, almost like molasses. If you put it on straight out of the can, you may want to do that for the last coat where you're really trying to build up your sort of film finish. The first couple coats tends to get pretty tacky. Typically we'll wind up doing for the first couple coats is thin this down by half, put 2 coats on, thin it down by a quarter, put a couple coats on, and then the last coat I may put on full strength. Generally I don't usually wind up using this sort of straight out of the can because it is very, very thick. Some other finishes that tend to be pretty sort of popular at the moment are these Osmo finishes. This is, I think, it's European, I think, might be specifically German, but this is their Poly-X hard oil. So again, there's some sort of oil in this, there's a little bit of wax in this, and something to thicken it up. Some of the Osmo finishes are more like a catalyzed lacquer. They're a 2-part finish. A lot of floor finishers tend to like the Osmo. They tend to cure hard, particularly the 2-part ones. I bought a can to play with it, and it's been here for about a year. It wasn't my favorite finish when I started with it. Again, I want to talk a little bit about a finish that I sort of mix myself. True Oil is marketed as generally as a gunstock finish. This is an oil varnish type finish. A lot of the finishes you're going to see on the market, these wiping oils, Formby's tongue oil, which I don't think it has any real tongue oil in it. A lot of these sort of wiping finishes are an oil varnish sort of mixture. We know there's some sort of oil in it, which kind of gives you a little bit of a solid. There might be some other solids in it. And then there's some sort of solvent and typically some sort of dryer in it. Whether it's been boiled, heated up so it polymerizes, or whether they put metal type dryer or something in it, we don't really know. But most of these finishes are all kind of more or less the same, handful of ingredients, usually 3 to 4 ingredients. The ratios differ a good bit, and that's where we don't really know sort of what the ratios are, and they never really tell you what's in them. But this one is a real easy sort of finish to work with. Just a little bit on the surface. You let it sit there for a few minutes and then wipe it off. And you can build up as many coats as you want. I find usually 1 to 2 coats kind of gives you a sort of a medium sort of maybe a little bit more than an eggshell type sheen. The more you build up, the higher that sheen becomes, and the more protective it's going to be. But yeah, really nice, easy finish to work with. What else we got here? Oh, this is Kramer's snake oil finish. I think I got this over at the Brass Armadillo. Luke introduced me to this finish, many years ago. I call it snake oil finish because, I don't know, you read the back of it and it's got sort of all these sort of miraculous type characteristics to it, but they never really tell you what the heck is in this stuff. So it's got some turpentine and some alcohol or some other stuff in it, but yeah. So basically it's a real sort of light finish, real easy to apply. I found it doesn't seem to hold up that well. It was something fun to play with, but I don't use it a whole lot anymore. Pure tongue oil. It's basically sort of the 2 true oils we've got to deal with. Not talking about the gunstock finish. Tongue oil and linseed oil.